Hi, everybody. How's it going? Look, I put on makeup for you today. Not, and I'm not in Palm Springs, so it's not 120 degrees. It's only like 78 or something in Los Angeles. It's fantastic. Sorry about the reflection on my glasses.
Is that Carol Lombard?
Maybe it is. Are you saying in the background or me? Because I live in a gay man's house, and believe me, Carol Lombard is somewhere in this house. He has Vivian Lee and Gloria Swanson. It's really good.
All there.
So chewing. You know what I was doing when Jeannie texted me and said, "Oh yeah, you're going to be teaching in 11 minutes"?
Chewing.
I was chewing. Who said that? Sachi?
Yes.
Oh, you're my chief heckler. I love it. I was chewing, and I was chewing because I know that I'll have a much better day if I chew, but we're going to talk about that in a second. So please raise your hand in the chat or the participants box if you already understand why chewing is important and you do it regularly. Raise your hands, please. Oh, Sachi's doing it like this. Okay, great. Anyone in the participant box raising their virtual hands? Because I'm not looking at you guys as gallery view. Hold on. Let me look at you as gallery view. Oh yeah, no one's showing them. Sachi's the only person showing her face in real time. Is it that early in the morning that we don't want to be showing our faces and only I am showing my face? Okay, so Jeannie chews, Deborah chews, Pam says pretty much. That's pretty good. Pretty much is good. Oh, Ken, virtual hand, and Jean chews. Okay. Well, even for the chewers in the audience, I think I might still possibly open you up to even more benefits of chewing, but let's see. So let's get this party started. I'm going to open up my chewing lecture. And you're going to see that I have a lot of stuff on my computer. Okay, chewing 101. Efficiency begins in your body. Now, this is my first question to people. A lot of people think that we're supposed to chew, and this is sort of the conventional wisdom around chewing, is like, oh, slow down and really taste your food. Like, be mindful. Like that chewing is about mindfulness. That it requires mindfulness, and the act of chewing has nothing more to do with your quality of life than that it is an opportunity for you to slow down. I know the virtual hand thing is complicated here, but I want in your mind to ask yourself, like, do I think that? Is that why I think chewing is important? Because I'm supposed to just be a good person. I'm supposed to be like a virtual eater. And if I'm going to bother to do all this stuff with Whole Foods and pay for them and schlep them home and cook them, then I might as well pay attention while I'm eating them. If you think on any level that that's the truth in your hand, in your life, in your mind, raise your hand. And I go, no, Family Feud, wrong. Sorry, I don't mean to be aggressive about it, but pandemic makes me aggressive. No, my point is that chewing is does not require mindfulness at all. Let me just make sure my next slide isn't like that. Chewing leads to mindfulness. Now, what I mean by that is that chewing is a mechanical function that's required for proper digestion. And one of the side effects of proper digestion of complex carbohydrates, which is practically all you're eating, is mindfulness. So take it from me. I chew watching TV. I chew cleaning my apartment. I chew cooking. I mean, yeah, I chew not cooking so much as cleaning. Did I just say cleaning? I meant in myriad random activities that should have nothing to do with chewing, and that we've been told our entire life, don't eat. Well, I mean, don't read while you're eating. Don't watch TV while you're eating. I chew in the car because chewing is about beating the crap out of complex carbohydrates. You have molars in order to beat the crap out of complex carbohydrates, and complex carbohydrates require the crap being beaten out of them. They will not be properly assimilated unless you beat the crap out of them. Now, there is a secondary factor in chewing that helps to break them down, which I hope is in my notes here, but let's just, let's go there. Okay, so I'll go back. So chewing is not only about beating the crap out of complex carbohydrates, because complex carbohydrates are, by definition, complex. That means they are a number of different molecules connected together. They are complex. They are more than what we call a disaccharide, which is 2 sugar molecules, or a monosaccharide, which is 1 sugar molecule. And disaccharides and monosaccharides, because they're not complex, tend to release their chemical bonds quite easily and convert to glucose very easily. But a complex carbohydrate with many, many molecules connected requires some mastication in order to break them down into their components of sugars, maltose being one here. And it's not only the beating the crap out of the complex carbohydrate that does this, but you'll see in this slide the application of amylase. Now, amylase is the primary digestive enzyme secreted by your saliva. You have a bunch of digestive enzymes, and they're secreted at different places in your gastrointestinal tract. But amylase, your mouth is like amylase central. And not only does your saliva have lots of amylase, it requires some chewing. Some people argue like 20, 25 chews to really get the amylase going. It's not just sitting in your stimulated saliva in your mouth right now, at least not that much of it. So when you have a piece of, a grain of brown rice in your mouth and you're beating the crap out of it and you're generating that amylase, you're generating the perfect chemical environment to break it down into glucose. Now, this is important. First of all, as we know, our body needs glucose. And as much as the word sugar gets maligned every single second of the day, natural glucose, which is the product of both simple and complex carbohydrates, is what our bodies run on. It's the natural fuel of the human body. Cells need glucose. But the organ that needs glucose more than any other is the brain. The brain needs glucose. So I'm going to go back to this slide, the fullness fallacy. I find it so, so funny. And it's part of science. Like, in other words, once we only have so much information and then we put forth a hypothesis about why nature is doing what it's doing. And that's how we learn. And then as soon as we find out that that was wrong, we forge ahead, new information, new hypothesis, new rationale. But I find it really funny when there's all sorts of rationales for things we don't understand. For instance, when people, and this was said to me like my whole life, sort of, well, you got to slow down because it takes 20 minutes for your stomach, like for you to register that you're full. Anyone ever heard that before? Just unmute yourself and say yes if you have. I want to make sure I'm not saying complete craziness.
Yes.
Yes.
Definitely.
Okay, great. Definitely. It's kind of like the thing like, oh, human women are supposed to have painful labors because we stand. We're not like on all fours, so our pelvises are smaller. That's kind of complete baloney too. But we get this idea that, oh, it takes 20 minutes for the stomach to register that it's full, for your brain to register that your stomach is full, which I think is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Like, let's pick that apart. Does that mean that when I stub my toe, it takes 20 minutes for it to register? You know, or if after I have an orgasm, it takes 20 minutes to be like, oh, wow, that was great. Or, I mean, what are we talking about? Why would your body be so stupid and so badly designed that it took this, there was this delay in registering a new reality? That's just absurd. And like nothing else in your body really does that, unless the delay is very long, meaning like you're eating differently and it takes a few days for something, you know, for you to feel your skin improve or feel the inflammation reduced in your joints. Okay, yeah. But in terms of us actually actively doing things to ourselves, the idea that it would take 20 minutes to register is just completely absurd. The reason they had to think that up was because people were eating probably fewer complex carbohydrates in this country and leaning much more on animal protein. But the reason they thought that as well is that fullness actually has nothing to do with the stomach. A sense of satisfaction, the registering of satiety, is not like, oh, this empty stomach is now full. That's not where it comes from. Satiety comes from glucose going to the brain. That's when you feel like, oh, like I can stop eating now. And the reason we have this weird 20-minute window is that if people aren't chewing, it does in fact take about 20 minutes for the whole grain that has not been properly had the crap beaten out of it to go through your stomach to your duodenum into your intestine, be worked on by more digestive enzymes in your small intestine, and then enter into your bloodstream and hit your brain. So it is true that it's taking 20 minutes for people to register that they're full, but not because there's some weird delay, you know, designed by nature. And in fact, like I said, think about the fullness in the stomach thing. There are people on IVs who almost never have food in their stomach and they're feeling a satiety. You can be incredibly hungry and then have a glass of wine and feel sated because what you've done is applied glucose to your brain and your stomach contents haven't changed at all. Oh, Jessica Porter, thanks for busting through all of science for us. Yeah, the kid who failed math in 10th grade and then couldn't take science, but did take Latin, French, Spanish, German, and Italian, okay? Click to add title, so clearly this slide isn't complete, but that's your brain giving a thumbs up. The whole point, sorry, I'm gonna adjust to the mirror aspect of Zoom. The whole point is we want our brains to feel satisfied. That's a huge, 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 huge thing. That's not just like, oh, I feel okay. Having your brain running on good quality glucose is kind of everything. It's a game changer. And if you've never chewed your food well enough to feel your brain working on good quality glucose, you must try it. Is Elaine Danforth here? Elaine, when I did my chew-a-thon on Facebook, maybe 12 years ago, Elaine was skeptical. And she'd be like, I don't know, I'm trying, and blah, 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 blah. And then this was a challenge to my Facebook friends who were interested in doing it, to chew every single mouthful of every meal 50 times. And that's a lot. But I felt like people needed like an eye of a needle to go through in order to see what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about like casual chewing. We'll get to this in a moment, but I'm not talking about like, oh, just chew better. There's a specific sort of Mach speed you have to reach to understand that your body can function completely differently than what you may have been used to your entire life. And then on Thursday, Elaine came back, like she'd been converted to a new religion and was just like, oh my God, I get it, I get it, I get it, I get it. And I love it when people get it. Okay, more brains on glucose. So let's get into the history of this. Well, first of all, for those of you who have been in macrobiotics for a while, Lino Stankic is who I call my chewru. I was introduced to macrobiotics, introduced the concept of chewing, did it a bit, but wasn't like, fully into it. And then I moved to the Kushi Institute, and the first person I met there was Lino Stankic. Not the first person to have an influence on me. The first person when I stepped onto the campus was him. And Lino is a spectacular guy, and he has a history with chewing that I really recommend that you read in his book called The Power Eating Program. Is that the title or the subtitle? I think it's the title, The Power Eating Program. It's like a slim volume, but it's a really, really interesting book about both Lino and his father having been prisoners of war and using chewing to extend the sustenance that they were getting and improve the energy that they had and survive better. It's extraordinary. So Lino and I talked about chewing relatively quickly, and that was part of what he taught at the KI, and I was very, very influenced by it. But what I didn't realize is that chewing goes back even further than that. Of course it does, it's a human function, but it has been in the public consciousness before. So in the early 20th century, a guy named Horace Fletcher, who came to be known as the Great Masticator, put forth his theory, and he has a great book called, is it here? Well, he liked to say, nature will castigate those who don't masticate, which I think is a pretty good rhyme. He wrote a book called Fletcherism, or How I Stayed Young at 60. I think that's the title, but it's called Fletcherism. So Fletcherism was, for Horace Fletcher, he believed in chewing each mouthful 32 times, which corresponded with the number of teeth that we have. But if any of us had grandmothers or great-grandmothers that were really, really onto the chewing thing, they were probably influenced by Fletcher. Fletcherism was a very big deal, and he was quite well known. He hung out with the Rockefellers, with Upton Sinclair. He had some place in Venice that he entertained people. He had an influence with the Belgian army, and he did these tests with athletes at Yale that showed him at like 55 at the time, or 60, doing like bench presses and stuff compared to these very young kids and doing extraordinarily well. And he was like, it's because I chew. It's because my body's working correctly. Fletcher described something which I find so fascinating. He called it the 3 inches of personal responsibility. And what he means is from here to here. Now, whether that's 3 inches on you or not, you get my drift. The whole idea is, if I don't apply my amylase and beat the crap out of complex carbohydrates in my mouth, if I don't do my job here, well, let's put it this way. It's the only place in my entire digestive tract that I can apply any control, that I can exercise any choice. After I've swallowed, I have no control. And what I swallow here, meaning whether it's a Snickers bar, whether it's badly chewed rice, whether it's protein, etc., once I swallow it, it's going to elicit an entirely different chemical reaction depending on what it is. Like your pancreas is going to send out more or less insulin based on how much sugar is in the thing that you have swallowed. And not just how much sugar, but the quality of the sugar. Is it slowly being released like in a complex carbohydrate, or is it spiking very quickly? But I do have a choice when the food is in here. And the more I chew and the more amylase I apply to that carbohydrate, the softer a ride that food has through the rest of my digestive tract, and the kinder and more gentle I'm being on all my other digestive organs. And it's really like an efficiency issue. I'll say to people sometimes, it's kind of like your body's a business. and you're running a business, and in any business, the first office you enter as a person off the street is the receptionist. And the receptionist then does triage, and she decides where you go. She decides if you go. She decides when you go. And your mouth is the receptionist. But we're all behaving like our businesses have no receptionist. And there's no discernment or selection about the quality of what's going in. And it is in your 3 inches of responsibility, personal responsibility, that you can make those choices. Okay. So he postulated that we should chew every bite 32 times. I think 50 is better. And in fact, I think 100 is ideal. And I don't mean every bite of every meal that you eat at all. I'm just saying, if you want to take a complex carbohydrate and convert it into that incredibly powerful, liquid filled with energy, aim to chew 100 times. You may only chew a bite 100 times 10 times a day of all the bites that you eat. That's okay. But those 10 bites are going to deliver what I call dumb happiness, stupid happiness. Oh, this is the name of his book, Fletcherism or How I Became Young at 60. So Fletcherism was a huge food fad. It was the biggest fad there was until we started counting calories, which basically eclipsed it. And you can see why. They're so different. One's organic and incorporated and using your body, and one's completely mental and objective and top down. So they kind of couldn't compete. So welcome to your mouth. Welcome to your mouth. First of all, you have molars for chewing. We all knew that, but do we use them? But did you know you have 2 types of saliva? Okay, first of all, you have stimulated saliva. Stimulated saliva is when I ask you to imagine sucking on a lemon, you produce stimulated saliva. When you smell food, you produce stimulated saliva. And you have unstimulated. Talk about that in a second. Let's explore stimulated saliva. So this makes up 70 to 90% of all the saliva generated in a day. You generate 2 to 3 pints of saliva, you disgusting person. No, we have a lot of saliva. And guess what? If you don't produce saliva, well, unstimulated saliva, but any saliva, it's a problem. It's a really big problem. And it's so interesting. There's a book called Gulp by an investigative journalist named Mary Roach. And it is the science and the history. She's a great writer. She's kind of like Bill Bryson, who tackles a subject and is sort of funny but investigative at the same time. She did a book called Stiff, which is all about death. It's investigative journalism about the gastrointestinal tract or the alimentary canal. So it's called Gulp, A Journey Down the Alimentary Canal. Fascinating book. I loved reading it. She talks about our saliva, and she talks about how our saliva is fine with us until it's outside of our body. As soon as we spit or something, it's considered disgusting and degrading and demeaning. It's just so interesting because it's just absolutely the opposite of that. And my issue with Mary Roach, she talks about Fletcher and Fletcherism in that book when she gets to the teeth and chewing. And she really is dismissive of it, which I found so bothersome. I was like, you are an investigative journalist. You're a human being with the equipment that he's talking about. And you don't bother to try this? You don't bother to test it? I was so mad at her because it's such a good book otherwise. Anyway, saliva, great stuff. In Oriental medicine or in Chinese history and folklore, stimulated saliva was called the jade juice. And you know how much the Chinese love their jade. So it nourishes qi and, quote, puts a man beyond the reach of calamities. Puts a man beyond the reach of calamities. That's a huge statement. What does it even mean? Well, I have meditated on this, and I think they're right to a great extent, and we'll talk about that in a bit. Stimulated saliva contains your digestive enzymes, amylase, maltase, and lingual, meaning, I don't know, mouthy, tonguey, I'm not sure. Lipase. Lipase breaks down fat. Amylase and maltase break down sugars. So the power of, so digestive enzymes. Okay, we all know we have digestive enzymes, but do you know how freaking cool they are? Digestive enzymes are so strong that I'm sure we've all done a version of this where you're eating a dessert or a soup or something, but a dessert, something with some body, with some gelatin action, meaning it has structure. You take the spoon that you have been eating with, and you are, of course, reapplying it to the custard because it's your dessert. No one else is going to eat it. You're not going to use 50 spoons. You put it in the fridge overnight, and when you wake up, there's liquid in the divot that you had created. That liquid is a function of the digestive enzymes from your spoon continuing to break down the custard in the night. So that's how active they are. They're even active outside your body. In fact, they're so active outside your body that detergents, laundry detergents, up until relatively recently, were made with the digestive enzymes of animals. In order to break down dirt in our clothing, we use the digestive enzymes of animals. Now we use digestive enzymes created by bacteria. But it's still like a natural thing that gets used. And it's an enzyme for digestion that gets used, which is crazy. That's how powerful they are. But get this, more than that. I remember hearing that, you know, in the Renaissance or just after the Renaissance, when people were restoring art, that art restorers used to use saliva on the paintings. Like they would, I don't know, lick their brush or their finger and get the dirt off with saliva. And I thought, oh, that's so interesting. That saliva is that powerful. And then I met a woman who is, in fact, an art restorer. And I said, Nicola, I hear they used to use saliva for restoring art. I wanted to test, you know, the fact. And she goes, oh yeah, we still do. They still use saliva. I mean, not every time, all the time, but it's a thing that art restorers know will cut through fats, dirt. So don't be so mean to your spit. It's kind of a big deal. Where's art restoring? Did I not put that in? Oh, sorry. Oh, art restoration. Okay. So stimulated saliva, the jade juice, contains digestive enzymes and alkalizes your food. So in the last 15 years or so, we've become very, very hip to, no, we'd be hip to it. You're a hep cat, you're hip to something. We become very hip to the function of inflammation in the body. And that some of us are walking around in a state of chronic inflammation. And one of the big causes of chronic inflammation is too much acidity. So we're all looking for ways to alkalize ourselves. And of course, most of us watching this are eating foods that are mostly alkalizing. Vegetables in general, except for the nightshade vegetables, are alkalizing. Whole grains are slightly acid forming, but just tipping into acid. And if we eat them with a pickle or salt them as we cook them, we tend to balance them out. But for people eating white sugar, white flour, nightshade vegetables, drinking lots of coffee, taking prescription medications, drinking lots of alcohol, you're talking about a body that is continually assaulted with acid forming foods, and that can produce a lot of inflammation. So because we don't really want to look at what we eat and go, oh, it's not the beer, it's not the wine, it's not the chocolate, it's not the coffee. Instead, I'm going to buy this water that's like got like 13.5 pH. So it's almost like so mineralized, so alkaline that you're drinking our liquid rock. And we've gotten sort of like, ooh, I got to alkalize. Well, guess what? The best alkalizing system in the world is in your mouth. So that saliva not only produces the amylase to break things down into glucose, it also, as Georgia would say, like, can convert poison into food. If you chew just about anything enough, the alkalinity of the saliva actually changes the quality of that food and improves it markedly. I took a trip to Peru in 1999, and I was there for 6 weeks, and I was really afraid that I would end up eating crappy food. And I was wrestling with an eating disorder, and I just didn't want this whole trip to be about me flipping out about food. So I made a decision that no matter what I ate in Peru, even if it was an Oreo cookie, I would chew it 100 times. Now, that was a pretty, doctrinaire, draconian thing to expect of myself, but it worked. And for 6 weeks, I chewed every single thing I put into my mouth, including an Oreo cookie. And not only did I feel good, I never got sick. My boyfriend got sick like 3 times with digestive stuff. I felt amazing. I had energy for every single thing that we did. I never needed to take a nap. I was completely present because there was glucose in my brain all the time. And my memories of Peru are like this crystal that I look through. They're so clear. But I remember chewing that Oreo cookie thinking, because we were on an Amazonian tributary, and the tour guides were totally in charge of our food. We had no control over our food. And so I was eating like pasta with, red sauce and yada, yada. And they throw you cookies for dessert. And I'm sitting there chewing the Oreo cookie thinking the chewing is actually going to make this not an Oreo cookie. I mean, obviously don't eat Oreo cookies all day, but your saliva is that powerful. Unstimulated saliva. This is the saliva that coats your teeth all day long. It's really, really important. If you don't create unstimulated saliva, well, we'll talk about that in a second, you'll lose your teeth. It is depositing calcium and phosphorus back into your teeth. Like, we think once a tooth, it's so funny, I'm giving this lecture for the first time since this tooth did this. I'll tell you, if you didn't hear it the other day, a story of this tooth. So this tooth is doing something called resorption, and they don't really know why. It may have been that I knocked this tooth as a child, and it is not following a normal, healthy path. But anyway, when I got braces as an adult, this tooth wouldn't move. It was too fixed in my jaw. And they said, this is going to start to rot. This tooth is going to start to do resorption. And they said, you should just take it out and put in an implant. And I said, well, how long is it going to take to start doing that? And they said, 1 or 2 years, maybe. And that was 17 years ago. And it finally started doing it in October of last year. It went red, and then it was red for about 3 months. And then on New Year's Eve last year, I went out and I ate sugar. And the next morning it was black. Changed color overnight. So my point is, I actually think that I lasted 17 years instead of 1 to 2 years. Probably because A, the quality of the food that I eat does not have me in a state of decay as rapid as your average North American. And B, it could be that I chew so much that I am actually remineralizing my teeth quite effectively, regularly. Anyway, your unstimulated saliva, if you've ever seen like meth addicts, they have really bad teeth. And the reason they have really bad teeth is that the crystal meth inhibits their saliva production. And if you go long enough without saliva, or people who have had salivary gland cancer or radiation of the saliva gland, if you go long enough without saliva, which isn't too long, by the way, your teeth completely fall apart. So unstimulated saliva is like your best friend. It has anti-clumping properties. So when bacteria creates, like tooth decay is not from bacteria itself, it's from the sort of poop that the bacteria produces after it eats the sugars in your mouth. And so sugar itself doesn't cause it. But what you want to be able to do on a regular basis is like swoop up all the bacteria and all the stuff that they're creating in your mouth. And your unstimulated saliva is actually keeping that stuff from clumping and creating plaque. It's also antibacterial. Your stimulated saliva is constantly cleaning your mouth. In fact, it is so well targeted to the bacteria in your mouth. Apparently something like Listerine is actually only targeted to about 50% of the bacteria in your mouth, but your own saliva registers and understands all of it because it's all the same environment. And then what happens is it gathers up your bacteria and you swallow it and it's killed in your stomach. Contains something called histidines or histatins, that's probably histidines, which are, well, depending on the species, like in rodents, they are nerve growing components. So when a rodent licks their wound, they're actually helping to regrow nerves. I can't remember what the human histidines do, but they're healing. They have healing properties. It's just not necessarily like nerve healing properties. So given all of this, like, why wouldn't you want to use your 3 inches of responsibility? Why wouldn't you want to apply this? So let's talk about how you actually chew. Well, start small. This is counterintuitive. If you haven't been chewing, this isn't going to be like, oh, suddenly flip a switch and you chew. I recommend to people that you start with, let's see what I say next here. Okay, start small, but aim for 50 to 100 times per mouthful. What that means is start small means if when you're chewing, you would normally just go and swallow, and suddenly you're putting together 10 or 12 chews, great. This will grow. This is a practice, like any other practice. And you will get better and better and better at it. So if you're not achieving 50 to 100 times on your first day, don't worry, that's completely normal. But you'll surprise yourself. And maybe after about 10 days, you'll be like, holy crap, I just chewed 100 times. Or maybe after a day, you'll feel that. But it does tend to grow. And part of why it grows is that your brain starts to get the glucose and you start to have a comparison between eating a meal and feeling like completely empty and like you didn't eat, and eating a meal and having your brain register really satisfying satiety. And once you've had that, once you've had true satiety, like the empty feeling will never suffice, and you'll constantly be like, hey, chew more, chew more, chew more, chew more. I can't tell you how many meals I like wolf down and then walk around my house going, why does my life suck so bad? Why do I hate my life so much? I don't really hate my life, but I can't do work. I need a nap. And then I go, dummy, chew. And I go back to the fridge and I take like 3 mouthfuls of rice and I chew them while I'm like doing the dishes, and I feel fantastic. And suddenly I'm completely able to face the rest of the day. You may have to tip your head forward because it's so counterintuitive to chew at this point. Like we're just trained. I mean, understand that all the muscles you have around chewing and swallowing are habituated to wolfing your food. So you might need to lean forward just to remind yourself like, we're not going to be swallowing just automatically. Use a salty condiment or pickle to stimulate saliva if you don't feel like your saliva is coming to the fore. And sometimes with a big, mouthful of brown rice, it feels dry. But if you throw like half an olive into that mouthful of brown rice, or some umeboshi plum or some dill pickle, it will suddenly create a ton of stimulated saliva, and then you'll have that liquid to help break down the rice. And by the way, you're not swallowing as you chew. You're keeping everything forward, you're chewing, and you're continuing to add saliva until after 100 chews or 50 chews or whatever, you should have a big mouthful of liquid. It's pretty gross, I'm not going to lie, but it is the jade juice. It is the jade juice in action. This is my thing with people. I say, listen, if you're really hungry, you're not going to be able to chew the first half of your meal. Think of it this way. You sit down to a meal, you wolf the first third, you enjoy the second third, and you chew the third third. Because you need to slow down in order to chew often. And don't be hard on yourself. Don't try and be perfect about this. You're learning an organic function. You're playing with your body in a way that it will begin to teach you and push you in the right direction. So don't let your brain get all like, I gotta do it like this. I gotta do it like this. You wouldn't do that with a little kid who's learning how to walk. You just, once they start to walk, like walking's not a thing anymore. Now they know. But you don't sit down your toddler one day and say, if you don't walk well today, I don't know. So the benefits of chewing. First of all, satisfaction. Now that's an easy word to say. Satisfaction, of course you feel more satisfied. What does satisfaction actually mean? What trouble do we get into as individuals and as a culture because we don't experience satisfaction in our bodies? When I say satisfaction, what I mean is that your glucose levels go up, your blood sugar goes up, and it feeds your brain. Your brain needs more blood sugar than any organ in your body. So when it's running on empty, it's sitting there going, Snickers bar, Snickers bar, Snickers bar. I'm not enough. There isn't enough in life. I don't have enough money. My husband's not enough. Nothing's good enough. If you're running around with chronic low blood sugar, you are constantly experiencing lack and you are constantly craving sugar. Now, you don't know necessarily that you're craving sugar. Some people have the, Snickers bar, Snickers bar, Snickers bar, but you're constantly craving more. Nothing is enough. That is a version of hell. To never feel satisfied, to never feel like this moment is full and perfect in its fullness. And I'm perfect in my fullness. Let me tell you, that's the chief benefit of chewing as far as I'm concerned. And we go to yoga classes and we go to meditation classes and we go to therapists in order to feel what you get from chewing complex carbohydrates 100 times. It's there. It's in your body. It's called glucose to your brain. So capitalism is completely fueled by a feeling of chronic dissatisfaction. So when you actually crack the code on it in your body and look around and think, oh, I don't need a new house, at least today. Oh, my husband's fine, and I'll just practice accepting him. Oh, one of the reasons I find satisfaction so precious too is that having wrestled with an eating disorder, I was a compulsive overeater and sometimes bulimic. And as a compulsive overeater, I was eating generally sugar. And I would eat and eat and eat and eat and eat, and my stomach would go out to here or feel like it went out to there. And although the sugar would hit for like the first 10 minutes, then it would crash. And I would sit there feeling so full. I was in profound physical discomfort that I was so full, and yet I wanted to eat more. I wasn't satisfied. So when I came across chewing and I really began to practice it, and for the first time in my life, between lunch and dinner, I wasn't thinking about what I was going to have for dinner. I would finish a meal and my second or third thought afterwards was, what's next? And to be relieved of that was one of the greatest gifts of my life. It gave me my life back. So satisfaction is a big deal. And if you feel chronically dissatisfied in any area of your life, you might want to try chewing and see what changes. Better digestion, proper use of fuel. This means you're pooping better. This means less or no heartburn. This is, I have a friend who has really real sensitivity to cruciferous vegetables and stuff, and he stays away from all of that. But when he chews well, he's fine. I mean, he's had the willingness to apply the chewing when I've recommended it, and he's like, "You're right. I can eat beans. Who knew?" Weight loss, and less stress on your body overall. I'm just going to go through these quickly. It's alkalizing, like I said. I can't tell you how many chronic health conditions are supported or founded upon inflammation. I mean, we're talking about cancer, heart disease, diabetes, all have an inflammation component. So if you were able to reduce the inflammation in your body by yourself, just by chewing, you're reducing the risk of all sorts of nasty knock-on effects. Finally, there's a spiritual connection that can be found in this feeling of satisfaction, in this feeling of blood sugar getting to the brain. And I think this is what they mean by like puts a man beyond the reach of calamity is first physical. When you chew, you feel coordinated, physically coordinated. You don't fall, you don't bump into things. Like your body isn't trying to like fight its way through this rubble that you've thrown down into the quarry. Not these rocks that you've thrown down into your intestines. It's liquid. You're digesting liquid. And so everything becomes like liquidy. And it's fantastic. And your consciousness becomes liquid. But I think putting a man beyond the reach of calamity is also about a connectedness with one's intuition, with one's body, with one's nervous system, with what they call the enteronervous system. You know, you have nerve cells in your heart, in your stomach, in your intestines. That's why we feel things. That's why we feel what's going on in our intestines, why we have gut feelings. But you have neurons. It's like there's a second brain in your body. And when we don't chew, all of our energy goes to digestion. And you don't get to just be in your body in this liquidy, incredibly, what's the word? I can't remember. I mean, in this way where there's no excess energy being applied. And then you can really hear what your neurons are saying. And you can really relate to the people around you. And you can really relate to whatever you call God. And I like to say that when I chew, all my problems go away. And what I mean by that is problems are generally a concern about the future or even a concern about the past. And we're sitting there and we're like sort of chewing on these problems in our minds, which makes them sort of in our aura. Our whole energy system gets poisoned by these like concerns. And when I chew and I'm fully present and fully in the moment, these things release. And I just handle my life right here, right now. And of course, I'm able to apply my imagination into the future and double click on my memory from the past, but I don't do it with the same kind of tension. If my body is tense digesting and everything's like, oh, okay, pancreas, let's go. And now there's and the duodenum, the amylase and the digestive, and it's like, there's too much activity. There's too much activity that gets reflected emotionally and mentally as well. When it's clear and liquid and there's tons of glucose, it's like, wah, and I have a completely different experience of my life. That's within your power. It doesn't cost anything. You have the equipment to do it. If you don't do it, the macrobiotic police are going to come around and arrest you. I didn't mention that until now, but that's true too. No, of course, that's a joke. Okay, any questions? That's my lecture. I'm going to stop sharing. Oh my God, are you still there?
Yes, we're all still here.
Great, great. Does anyone have any questions?
Hi, Jessica. I don't have questions. This is Pam in Minnesota. That was the best talk ever. Best talk ever.
Thank you, Pam.
I am going to make like a train and chew, chew, chew. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. You're very, very welcome. Well, not only have I taught this lecture several times, so I'm really familiar with the material. I, in fact, had chewed right before giving it. And I think I always chew before I teach because the quality is much greater. I'm much more connected. So thank you. I really appreciate that. You're where in Minnesota? Is that what you said?
St. Cloud, Minnesota, about 50 degrees and delicious today. Yes,
Great.
yes. And I have that where I don't feel satisfied. And so even though I chew more. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It'll make a big difference. Let me know what you think.
I will. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Oh my God,
Jessica.
David Rubin said, if the Rolling Stones had known Leno and had been chewing their food well, they never would have had their #1 hit, I Can't Get Enough Satisfaction. It's true, David. So let's thank God that Mick Jagger wasn't chewing.
Jessica, I heard this lecture
Yeah.
in LA quite a few years ago, probably
Yeah.
the first time. And I chewed during the whole lecture, just my saliva. And not to gross you out, but the next bowel movement was the best I ever had.
You know, in the early 80s, I mean, I hadn't really realized that constipation and just elimination in general becomes a bigger and bigger deal as we get older. And he was talking about, he's a farmer, and he ate a sort of standard Canadian diet, but good quality, you know, junk food. And about it, he kind of mentioned, like, you know, one of the reasons he didn't like to travel was because he felt constipated by it. And I just said, you know, Uncle Dana, if you eat brown rice, and they were eating a little bit of brown rice at the time, and I said, if you want you to chew it really, really, really well, and it got in. And then the next like 3 times I spoke to him on the phone, he's like, you know, that chewing thing really works, really works. And I just thought that's so great because that's such a big deal. Such a big deal to be able to eliminate. Such a big deal. Anyone else? Thank you, Jean, for telling us about your poop, giving us the, as my mother said, the organ recital. Hey, Gretchen, did you want to say something? I think you're muted. You're muted, Gretchen.
She has a comment, Jessica, that says, I have a lot of mercury in my teeth, and I've been told that chewing releases some of that.
Huh.
So I'm always
Interesting.
torn on what to do. Can you elaborate?
Interesting. That's really interesting. I mean, David, you are such a punster. Your talk has been so stimulating. You know, Gretchen, have you considered getting the mercury taken out? Or is that more dangerous? Are they discovering lately that the taking out of the mercury is even worse? Gretchen, you're muted. Can you unmute yourself? Yeah. Sorry, we got your chat, Gretchen. So have you considered getting the mercury taken out?
My dentist doesn't think it's a good idea. I mean, it's all over. I mean, you know, under caps, under, you know, this is a funny story, not so funny, but my mother used to feel so bad when she took me to the dentist as a child that after we went to the dentist, she'd take me to the local department store for coconut custard pie and a Coke.
Yeah. So your teeth have taken a beating.
So anyway, I have a lot of mercury.
The other thing is you can just put food in your mouth, Gretchen, and get saliva going into it. And that's going to be something of an improvement. You know what I mean? Like, let it sit there with a little bit of pickle, generate some saliva, because regardless of the beating the crap out of it, the saliva will begin to do the breaking down, which is a fundamental part of the process. So just because you have the mercury, don't let your saliva get lazy. In fact, it might need to take up some of that slack.
Oh no, I mean, I chew a lot, and but I just worry about how much inflammation I'm causing from the mercury.
Right. And I don't know. I mean, I don't know, but
Yeah.
Probably better to chew than not, but I'm no dentist.
Yeah.
Who else? Any other questions? Nice to see you, Gretchen.
Nice to see you.
Any other questions? Elaine, did you hear me talk about you, Elaine?
I missed it. We had to go grocery shopping, taking
Of course you
advantage of the special hour in the beginning of the day. So
I said that during the chewathon on Facebook that you became a convert by like Thursday.
yeah, I wondered if you would be still telling that old story.
Yes. No,
Yeah, the chewing house. It's like for me, I have to say I definitely could increase now, but for a long time I have many chewing poems on my blog inspired by your #Tuesday events, which were very helpful.
It was really great to see you go through the eye of the needle, in real time, and see you begin to understand the benefits or experience the benefits, because they're real. They're not conceptual. They're real.
Yeah, I have to get back into that belief.
I know. Well, we all stray from it. Believe me, I chew better and worse just depending on the day, but it's there, it's available, and your body knows it, so it'll never forget.
One thing that I really notice about when I chew a lot is that I'll have a plate full of food, and I don't need that plate full of food when I'm chewing every bite, 30, usually 50 times, 30 to 50 times. I just don't need that whole plate of food. But if I'm not chewing, I need that whole plate of food and then some.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Thank you for mentioning that. They did a whole study in China where they had chewers and non-chewers, and the chewers, I can't remember. I mean, they all lost weight, but it was and they needed a certain percentage of fewer calories than the non-chewers. I think it was something like 12%, which didn't seem that much to me, but it was decisive that the chewers needed fewer calories. Yeah. Absolutely. It's a great weight loss technique without getting rigid. You still feel satisfied. You can eat anything you want, but if you chew it, you are guaranteed to eat less and spend less on food even.
And I hadn't heard satiated. The word I would use was satiated, but you fancied that word up. What did you call it? It was so fancy.
Apparently the actual word is sated, to be sated.
Okay, it's very fancy. I didn't know that word.
The noun
satiety.
of satiety.
It's like you just go up in stature when you say satiety. Which only you can do, Jessica, of course.
Sachi, your name is practically satiety. Sachi, it's close. It's satiated. Yes. And having spoken to you, I've been satiated. I love it.
Oh God, no wonder you're a comedian.
Whether or not you need all the plate on your food or you feel sated, you get pretty darn tired of chewing, quite frankly.
It's true. It's like chewing, but it's worth it. And that's what I'm saying. Like,
oh yeah, I know, but it's like
a third, enjoy a third, and chew a third. You don't need to. If you were to chew everything all the time, you'd be a very boring person.
Have you seen that rubber thing that's supposed to exercise your jaw and be really good for you?
Oh
it's
my
like
gosh.
This rubber ball they sell.
Oh,
and I just thought it was so funny. Instead of chewing your food, people are buying this rubber ball to put in their mouth.
They don't realize that they have, and your muscles do get really strong from doing it. I just want to read the other chat things here. Oh, seaweed helps detox mercury, Jean is saying to Gretchen, just FYI, that, seaweed has anti-radioactive components, anti-mercury. That's really good. I forgot. Carol, your thoughts about chewing and shifting the energetics of the food, eating lean meat from wild animal. Well, here's the thing, is that amylase is digestive enzyme specifically targeted towards carbohydrate. Protease, which is what breaks down protein, is digested in the stomach. So when it comes to chewing and animal products, well, specifically meat, because dairy actually has a lot of carbohydrate in it, a lot of sugar. Meat is not, you don't need to chew meat. It gets gamey. There's no carbohydrate in it. So I don't think that chewing applies when it comes to meat, actually. So it's a good question. Hi, Cynthia. Nice to see you too. So how do you practice chewing? I just chew, like I said, I just try and chew regularly. And when I forget, my whole life falls apart. And that's when I remember. And nice to see you too, David. I want to get off because we're 4 minutes late. I don't want to push the schedule. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Nice to see you guys. Happy camp.
Thanks, Jessica.
Really glad you
Thanks,
could be there.
Jessica.
See you later.
Bye. Bye.